I did promise that I'll come back to give at least 3 key indicators of what I meant by self-leadership. And so here they are. Number 1, a leader understanding his own disposition. A leader understanding his own disposition. And when you think about the leader's disposition, you remember this would include things like self-control. And what do we mean when we say self-control? I mean things like anger, emotion, words that are used, types of words that are used, tone in which you speak, especially when you are communicating with others. These are some of the things when we think about the leader's disposition. This is your own disposition now. So it takes the leader to review themselves. Number 2 is the leader's values. What are your values? Before you can say, what's your vision, what values do you hold and adhere to? These are some things that a leader needs to know about themselves. And when we think about the third thing is ability or abilities. I always say that a leader is taking responsibility, and responsibility means responding to your ability or abilities. You are responding to your ability. So when it comes to leadership, leaders would be interviewed, or in some situations you just arise to the occasion, but it means you are responding to the abilities you believe you have or you actually know that you have. The same thing when you interview for a job, which is a leadership role, is the same thing. You are basically going to be responding to your own abilities. That's why people want to know what your skill set is, and so on and so forth. So these 3 things, your disposition, and this is about self-leadership, which means you need to introspect, you need to know yourself, or let me use that phrase where it says know thyself. You need to know thyself. And that requires you looking inside, you understanding your own values. So number 2 is the values. You understanding your own values. And when I say values, I also mean your own value system. In some quarters, we would use the word your belief system. What is your belief system? What drives you? Before we start talking about the vision itself, how are you in harmony with the vision in which you are leading on? That's equally as important. And I said something about self-control as well. So all this is all encompassing self-control. And number 3 is abilities. What are your abilities? Do you know what they are? Are they developed? And so on and so forth. Now, there's another thing which I believe is interesting to note when it comes to self-leadership, is how you manage your own ego. And this is a big one. How you manage your own ego, because many times one's ego can get in the way of your leadership. So these are the 4 important things to note, but the first 3 I think they're quite easy to deal with, but the 4th, which is the ego, and I think that's the hardest to really deal with, but not impossible. Once you recognize your ego, you should know or learn how to tame that ego of yours as well. Now, next time we would go into some other areas or further expatiate on the areas in which I've mentioned. Now, there's one thing that did cross my mind that I said, okay, maybe I should add this to the list that we have. And this is knowing your own triggers. So when I said things like your disposition, self-control, I think part of helping to deal with self-control is understanding what your triggers are. And you can only do this if you understand yourself. So you need to spend a lot more time even with yourself to get to know and understand yourself. before you can even start to understand others and help others become better leaders as well. So that's where that headline or topic, the leader's maturity, where it came from. Well, let's take a break now and we'll come back again and then touch and expand and probably take some questions on the other areas of leadership.